At the end of this lesson, you will be able to discuss the different concepts of hypothesis testing and develop null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis. First is we need to define what is hypothesis testing. Hypothesis testing is an area of statistical inference wherein we can evaluate conjecture about some of the characteristics of a population based on the data gathered from the sample. So the main purpose of statistics is to test a hypothesis. Like for example, you might run an experiment and find that a certain drug is effective at treating headaches. But if you can't repeat that experiment, no one will take your results seriously. So a good example of this was the cold fusion discovery, which petered in the obscurity because no one was able to duplicate the result. Okay, so now let's proceed. What is a hypothesis? A hypothesis is an educated guess about something in the world around you. It should be testable either by experiment or by observation. Take note that a hypothesis is an educated guess that can be tested. It is a statement that describes the population parameter. It is a tentative explanation, a claim, or assertion about people, objects, or events. So we have here different examples of hypotheses. A new medicine you think might work, a way of teaching you think might be better, a possible location of new species, a fairer way to administer standardized tests, the mean grade of engineering students of ABC University enrolled in Calculus 2 is 1.85. There is a significant difference in the proportion of consumers who purchase brand A toothpaste before and after the advertising campaign in the television station. And then, there is no significant difference between the mean performance of ABC University and XYZ University in June and December dental board examination. And then last one we have, there is a significant difference in the mean lifespan between brand A and brand B batteries. Okay, so if you are going to propose a hypothesis, okay, it is customary to write a statement. So your statement will look like this. If I, then you're going to state the independent variable, then what will happen to the dependent variable? So independent variable, yan yung pinapalitan ng researcher, and the dependent variable that is affected by the change or that is affected by the independent variables. So we have here examples on how to state a hypothesis. So if I decrease the amount of water given to herbs, then the herbs will increase in size. So the independent variable in this statement is the decrease the amount of water given to herbs, and the dependent variable in this statement is the herbs will increase in size. Okay, another example. If I give patient counseling in addition to medication, then their overall depression scale will decrease. So the independent variable here is give patient counseling in addition to medication, and the dependent variable in this statement is their overall depression scale will decrease. Okay, another example. If I give exams are at noon instead of 7, then the student test will improve. Independent variable in this statement is you're going to give your exam at noon instead of 7. And the dependent variable will be the student's score will improve. Okay, so now let's proceed. Last example. If I look in this certain location, then I am more likely to find a new species. Okay, so the dependent variable in this statement is you're going to find a new species, and the independent variable here is you're going to look a certain location. So, tandaan lang po natin that a good hypothesis statement should be, okay, it includes if and then statement. It includes independent and dependent variables. Okay, it must be testable by experiment, survey, or other scientifically sound technique, and then it must be based on information prior research. Okay, another one is have design criteria for engineering or for programming projects. So we have here two types of hypotheses, the null hypothesis and the alternative or alternate hypothesis. So unahin muna natin ang null hypothesis. So null hypothesis is denoted by H sub 0. The capital letter H stands for hypothesis, and the subscript 0 implies zero difference or no difference. Okay? This is usually designated by not or no term in the null hypothesis, meaning there is no change. Okay? So the null hypothesis is also the initial claim. It shows no significant difference, no changes, nothing between two parameters, and the dependent variable has no effect on the dependent variable. So, if we're going to write it in a mathematical term, so we have null hypothesis is equal to some value. Okay? Take note that in null hypothesis, ang kailangan lang po nating tignan dyan na term, keyword natin is the equal, the same as, not change from, and then is. Or another one is greater than or equal to, then less than or equal to. Okay, so we have, this can be expressed in any of these three possible forms. So we have this one. The null hypothesis equals to some value. Null hypothesis is greater than or equal to some value. And the null hypothesis is less than or equal to some value. Okay, so now let's proceed to alternative hypothesis or alternate hypothesis. Alternative hypothesis, on the other hand, it is hypothesis to be considered as an alternative to the null hypothesis. Okay, take note that alternative hypothesis is what the researcher believed to be true when the null hypothesis turned out false. Okay, ang alternative hypothesis, it is also known as research hypothesis. So, alternative hypothesis is denoted by H sub A or H sub 1. So, may mga ibang book kasi ginagamit dyan ay H sub A. But, if you're going to research it sa Google, meron nagpapakita na H sub 1. Okay? So, the simple, this one, H sub A stands for alternative hypothesis. Okay. Another one, alternative hypothesis is contrary to the null hypothesis. It shows there is significant difference, an effect, change, relationship between parameter and then a specific value. Okay, another one, the independent variable has an effect on the dependent variable. Okay, so the keyword for alternative hypotheses are not equal, different from, change from, not the same as, and then greater than, higher than, longer than, bigger than, increase, and at least. And then we have less than, below, lower than, smaller than, shorter than, decrease or reduce from, and then at most. Okay, so alternative hypotheses can be expressed in any of these three possible forms. So we have alternative hypothesis is not equal to some value, and then we have greater than some value, and we have less than some value. Take note H sub A or pwedeng H sub 1. Okay? So we have here an example. We need to state the null hypothesis and then the alternative hypothesis. Okay, first example. The mean grade of engineering students of ABC University enrolled in Calculus 2 is 1.85. Okay, so our keyword in this statement is the word is. Okay, so yung is dyan is a keyword for null hypothesis, right? Okay, so if we're going to write it in a mathematical term, we have the mean grade of engineering students of ABC University enrolled in calculus is equal to 1.85. Okay, so if we're going to reject the null hypothesis, we have, or the alternative hypothesis would be not equal to. Okay, so we have here example number 2. A researcher thinks that if knee surgery patients go to physical therapy twice a week instead of 3 times, their recovery period will be longer. Okay? The average recovery times for knee surgery patient is 8.2 weeks. Okay, so the hypothesis statement in this question or in this statement is that the researcher believes that the average recovery is more than 8.2 weeks. Okay, so yung keyword natin dito is more than. Okay, so more than is an alternate hypothesis. So ganyan po yung mathematical term natin. And then, if you're going to state the null hypothesis, okay, if the researcher is wrong, then the recovery time is less than or equal to 8.2 weeks. Or in mathematical term, we have like this. Okay, another example, let's proceed to example number 3. The average number of calories of low-calorie meal is at least 250. Okay, the keyword here is at least. Okay, at least is for alternative hypothesis or alternate hypothesis. So if you're going to write it in mathematical terms, so we have like this. And then, if you're going to reject the null hypothesis, we have the average number of calories of low-calorie meal is equal to 250 calories. Okay, so now let's proceed to example number 4. If the null hypothesis is I'm going to win up to 10,000 pesos. Okay, so we have, if we're going to reject the null hypothesis, then ang magiging alternative hypothesis natin or alternate hypothesis is I'm going to win more than 10,000 pesos. Okay, next example, we have the null hypothesis, there was no change in the water level this spring. Okay, reject natin si null hypothesis. We have alternate hypothesis is there was a change in the water level this spring. So now let us proceed to example number 6. It's an accepted fact that ethanol boils at 173 degrees Fahrenheit. You have a theory that ethanol actually has different boiling point of over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, so identify natin the null hypothesis and the alternative hypothesis. Take note that the alternate hypothesis is just an alternative to the null hypothesis. Okay, so the accepted fact here in this statement is ethanol boils at 173 degrees Fahrenheit. So this would be the null hypothesis. Okay. And if you have your theory, yan na yung magiging alternate hypothesis natin. So we have ethanol boils at 174 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, another example. A classroom full of students at a certain elementary school is performing at lower than average level on standardized tests. The low scores are thought to be due to poor teacher performance. However, you have a theory that the students are performing poorly because their classroom is not well ventilated as the other classrooms in the school. Okay. So if we're going to identify the null hypothesis and the alternative hypothesis, we have the null hypothesis is the low score test of the students are due to poor teacher performance. So if we're going to reject the null hypothesis and you have your theory, that would be the alternative hypothesis. So the low score test of the students are due to inadequate ventilation in the classroom. Okay, so that's all for today. Thank you for watching, and if you have any queries, feel free to ask me. Goodbye and God bless.